Here. Schultz.
Here.
Behrenkamp.
Here.
Nichols. Here. Freaking Counselor Bodema is ill today, so he will not be joining us. If you'd stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, I'd like to.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, agenda approval. Anything from staff?
No changes from staff at this time.
Anything from council? I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That carries. Commission representatives, we have Jim Shulock and Lisa Weifels from Planning and Parks and Trails, respectively, online, I believe.
Yes, they are.
Perfect. And now we'll go into open forum for anything that's not on tonight's agenda.
Perfect. Anyone wanting to speak on anything not on tonight's agenda, joining virtually can press *9 or click reactions and raise your hand. Otherwise, we do have several folks here to comment on item 8A that I've received comment cards on. So if anyone does want to speak, can come to the podium. At this time, Mayor and Council, no one is raising their hand electronically.
Perfect. Okay. We'll go into, let's see here, no presentations. Consent agenda consisting of items 7A through 7F. Does anyone want to pull anything?
Mr. Mayor, I just would like some clarification on 7B, so if we could pull that just for a quick.
B, sure thing. Anything else?
I would like to pull 7C, please.
7C.
For 7E, I don't need to pull it if I can just recognize Hope Community Church and St. Thomas now for
Sure.
letting us use their facilities for polling places in 2023. Appreciate
Yeah.
that.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Okay, so we don't need to pull E. So just B and C? Nothing else? Okay. I'll entertain a motion to approve consent agenda items A, D, E, and F.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, 7B, Bullrath Ag Building CUP.
Mr. Mayor, and Natalie, you may be able to clear this up real quick. I know in the planning commission there was a conversation about the wetland or the 100-year floodplain and stuff. As I read the information, it looks like it was defined as 1,006 feet, and that's west of that driveway. Is that correct?
I have not received any updated information to show that that was defined. I think that that may have been based on the Hennepin County data where you're getting that number. They haven't worked with me. I don't know if Kevin knows of anything or Steve is online, if they've received anything, but I haven't received anything showing an updated survey that has that defined.
So my question is, we would consent to this, but there's still
Conditions of
defining
approval
that and
they have
such?
to work through, yes. So the condition of approval and the resolution, let me pull it up.
Wouldn't, and I'm looking, yep, the applicants are here too, but
Yeah, so they'll have to either mitigate flood impact elsewhere on the property, and they have plenty of land to be able to.
oh, I understand that. When will they know what that boundary is?
They will have to work with, I believe their surveyor, do you know?
They have surveys, they have everything, they just are asking, and I'm asking, there needs to be a floodplain line, or what is the floodplain, and we can't just get that? I don't want them paying for another survey and stuff. They've stuck money into this.
To technically define a floodplain requires significant level of effort of modeling. We're not requiring that here. We'll have to work with our engineer to look at the saddle or where it overtops, and we have to be more conservative in that elevation if we don't
Okay.
actually model it. It's also a watershed condition, so we have to work with watershed staff. If we're not gonna model it and define it, we have to make sure we're a little more conservative. so that we can handle that. So we have to work with our engineering team and the watershed team to make sure we agree upon an elevation.
Is there any timeline that can be done? I mean,
We could just gotta schedule a meeting and go through it with the individuals and look at some information.
okay. If I could request that on their behalf, they're extremely anxious to get going and such, and it means a lot to, I think, our community and everybody that has talked about this. I think it's something that I'd like to get done sooner than later. If we have anything we can do for that, it'd be great.
I can reach out and schedule a meeting, and then they'll have to apply to the watershed and whatnot, but we can get that going.
Is that more cost to the applicant than to, or?
For there'll be a fee for the watershed to review it, yes.
Okay. That, I
I don't know if there's.
thought it'd be simpler than that, but,
Or they adjust their plans and stay out. They only need the watershed permit if they're going to request an impact, so then that impact has to be documented. So if we sit down with them and we say it's at an elevation of 1,005, I'm making up that number, and they adjust their grading plans to stay out of 1,005, then they wouldn't need a watershed permit. If they want to fill in a portion of the area under 1,005, then they would need the watershed permit and show how they're mitigating it and get that approved.
and it would be determined
So
at
there
that
is some
time.
decisions on what they want to do, whether there's additional costs or not.
Okay,
So either way, a meeting is the next,
Yep.
or the first next.
all right. Thanks.
Anything else on it? I will entertain a motion to approve item 7B.
So moved.
Second.
I think, Counselor Nichols, was that you? Okay, perfect. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Carries. Okay, 7C, Jeremy.
I had two questions on this one. My first question is on the architectural upgrades exhibit. It wasn't entirely clear to me on review which lots will require architectural upgrades. My layman's swag made it seem like Unit 1 in Block 1, Unit 4 in Block 2, Units 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 in Block 3, and 3, 4, and 5 in the other Block 1. Looked like they would face a public right-of-way or a park, but I'm not sure if that's correct.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Nichols, on the architectural upgrades exhibit, I tried to draw the red lines on the elevation that needed that, which is page 95 of the PDF. So I think, I wasn't there yet when you read them off.
Sorry.
But there are 3 9 lots that have architectural upgrades. Did that match your?
So,
So 1, 8, and 9 on Block 3 along Tamarack.
yes.
And then at the end of the cul-de-sacs, lots 1, 3, and 4, and 11, Block 2. And then lots 1 and 6, Block 1.
What was that last one? Sorry.
1 and 6, Block 1.
I'm not seeing the 6.
6
Oh, over
is
there, okay.
At the, towards the cul-de-sac.
So what about along Tamarack on the east side, Unit 4?
On the east side of Tamarack, those are in the 3rd edition.
So that'd be covered by a previous, but
Yes.
that would require it?
Right, that's why that's not in this. So it's just the lots on the west side of Tamarack.
Sorry. The other thing I wanted to ask about is tree preservation. So Parks and Trails Commission, where I was liaising month before last, we talked about some trees that were accidentally removed. 32 trees total were taken, about 444 caliper inches. We're getting a 1-to-1 tree replacement for the 32 trees. And for this particular development, tree preservation was one of the major PUD benefits. So I asked a question of staff earlier. I know there's been some email dialogue back and forth with the developer asking about what the process at least had been when the mistake was made before. I
I would like to see a more detailed plan for how we're going to handle it in this area, because there were a number of areas of tree preservation denoted. What I'd like to see is how will this area be handled differently than it was before, and what remedy will apply if additional trees are taken beyond what were expected. I'd like to see that in writing ahead of time before we go ahead and authorize it, just because we know that the existing controls weren't adequate at least once, and I just want to make sure that we don't lose any more of that PUD benefit by proceeding. And I'm going to find a way to turn this thing off. Sorry. There's training going on in Europe that I'm missing.
Did you share the email?
I shared it with Counselor Nichols. Yep.
So, I don't know if there's a question. I did reach out to Lennar, Councilmember Nichols, and provided a written summary from them about how they will ensure that tree protection is in place. And just for the council members.
Okay. I'm going to double.
Okay.
Make sure I didn't miss it.
The program, and we developed this with Tavera, we really didn't have a formal tree preservation program, I think, in some of our early subdivisions, but the process for tree preservation in general, but specifically in the Tavera subdivision is, as part of the site or plat and PUD, the city will review the tree preservation areas. I think, looking back, perhaps we shouldn't have accepted that as tree preservation in the middle of a forested area that's being removed, but that's beside the point. Staff will be looking more closely at the tree protection areas in the future. But what happens is the plans then show the tree protection fencing on the plan. It's reviewed by engineering and planning. In the field, then Lennar goes out and stakes the tree protection fencing, and then our engineering inspectors go out and look at the tree protection fencing through a tree walk, I guess, to make sure that the limits are correct, to make sure that those stakes and fencing are installed in the right location and are in fact protecting the trees they're supposed to. And then engineering is out there inspecting on a daily basis, and generally that we believe will protect the tree preservation. In this case, again, it was in the middle of a large stand of trees that was largely being removed. And I was not on the tree walk, so I'm not entirely sure. I believe it was an accident that it was removed. How that exactly happened, Lennar makes us guess in their email. But I think in general, Kevin and I have talked about this, that this is a mistake, it happened, but I think in general that system is a pretty good system for protecting the trees. We don't have another suggestion to do that. To the comment about how we restore them after the fact, I mean, certainly we don't have a tree protection ordinance, so we don't have a written formula for that, but the one-to-one removal is something you do see in other ordinances. It could be something else. It could be something that we talk about as part of a PUD general plan in the future. Because that's really the only place we can have tree protection as a requirement, is if it's a PUD.
Right. Which it was in this case, just we didn't
Right.
we didn't have the forethought to expect that something like this
Correct.
could happen. I know we talked about at the final approval, the first phase final approval, what are we going to do to protect the trees? There was a discussion of the fencing. What I'd like to see is a system that the applicant is comfortable with, to the level that if they made a mistake, they would do a caliper inch to caliper inch replacement. That would give me total confidence. If they're that confident in what they're doing, that they're willing to offset the number of inches that are removed versus just a one-to-one tree replacement, that tells me that the system is robust. And if they don't have the level of confidence, I would be a little more concerned.
I'd be open to that, but I think it would have to be done at the time of, when the next PUD comes in. I don't know how you'd put it in place for something that's ongoing.
That's a good question. My take on it is, because tree preservation is listed as a PUD benefit, and there's a documented example of it being not adhered to in the way that it was originally agreed, we should be within our rights to request clarification at a minimum before we proceed with the next phase. If not an enhancement in the way that that's handled.
Do we have any remedy? Can we impose anything on them?
We believe as staff, with the tree replacement, that the one-to-one tree replacement is reasonable. I don't know that we could do more than that after the fact. I don't believe it was malicious. I don't know. Since it wasn't as a condition and we don't have a tree protection ordinance, we don't have a standard in place, I don't know that going back, we can adopt a penalty out of the blue. Moving forward, for other tree protection in future developments, absolutely, I think we can be more aware of that and include that. I think it's harder on this development that's on phase 5 of 8 or 9.
So the spot that was supposed to be protected was supposed to be fenced in that larger area,
Correct.
but it wasn't fenced?
Seemingly.
The email said that it was staked, but not fenced, because they didn't see the stakes.
It seems funny that they can't selectively cut a 20-acre parcel where my deer stand is in 500 acres, and the U.S. Forest Service has got them marked to selective cut that land, and those foresters will be fined heavily if they violate those things. So I'm kind of remiss at the amount of mistakes that I see from developers and various developments within the city after the fact. I think we're going to have to use a better stick going forward.
Well, and certainly if we had a tree preservation ordinance in place, it would be very clear about what the penalty is. If you look at a typical tree preservation ordinance, that's part of it, so that everybody knows going into it. I really think our field guys, our inspectors missed it. It was, apparently a pretty challenging spot to walk through, but I wasn't out there. I don't know what happened. I just know that they're gone.
No, I understand that, but, it shouldn't be on us to follow the rules, to enforce them. It should be upon them to follow the rules,
Right.
Similar mistakes have happened in every development in the city, and I don't see how.
Frustrating.
Keeps happening.
What I'd like to do here is table it until the next meeting and have them come back with a written plan that details what they're going to do, that gives them confidence they're not going to make a mistake, such that they would do more than a tree for tree replacement. If we have the time to wait, I think that would be time well spent to make sure that system is robust as we can make it.
Do we have any constraints on approval?
I was just going to add one data point. This area that the Tavera Fifth has been graded and all the tree removals are down already. I don't know if that makes a difference or not, but it was graded with the first phase.
So there's no more cutting to be done
No
here?
more cutting for this approval, so it wouldn't be, I don't know if that makes a difference or not. I just wanted to be clear that it's already, site's been graded and the tree removals happened in this area.
Maybe it's something we should ask for any phases that haven't come in yet. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think in light of that, it would probably be more meaningful when the 6th edition comes in to make part of the application a specific response to that. And I think that would be
I'd support
easier
that.
for those new phases, although most of that's probably graded too, but at least we'd have that moving forward.
I think, well, most of the site's been approved to be graded, and I believe all the tree removals have happened for the whole site. So I think the concern about more trees accidentally getting cut down is very, very low, because I think everything's been cut down. But that doesn't, just data for you guys to factor into your direction.
Okay.
I do think it's a good policy to put in place for the future, even if it's not going to be particularly applicable in this development anymore.
If it's part of the PUD, we got to be able to hold them accountable for violating that PUD in the future. Obviously, we can now.
So we could look at adding that with the 6th edition language when that comes in.
Right, and we are holding them accountable in the sense that we are requiring the trees to be replaced.
How many caliper inches did they cut down that they weren't supposed to?
444.
So we're talking 444. How many trees does that translate into?
It was 32.
220.
It was 32 trees, many of them were larger trees.
Yeah.
And to try to replace that many trees in that area, they would not survive. We wouldn't allow anyone to do that as a practice. So they're putting as many as they can in that area, and the remainder of the 32 are going in the, sort of to the southeast of that is the plan that we have in City Hall. It hasn't been approved. We're waiting for some grading information.
And part of that is just that we want to make sure that those trees survive, and so that's why having some of that, we wouldn't be able to replace them all in that area just because we wouldn't want to see
Oh, right.
us put in new trees that can survive.
But the way that Parks discussed it, we were expecting it to be an inch-for-inch replacement. So you'd scatter them across the site instead to get an equivalent volume of tree to what was mistakenly removed. So if we're talking about setting policy for future developments, that's probably what I would look to see as a provision in the agreement, that if there's erroneous removal beyond planned requirements, that it's inch for inch somewhere within the site, and if it doesn't fit on the site, then we can look at City Park or someplace like that.
I'd agree.
We can certainly look at adding that into our language that we do for future approvals.
Okay. Sounds good. Anything else related to the 5th specifically?
No.
I will entertain a motion to approve consent agenda item 7C.
So moved.
Have a second? I'll second it. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
All right.
Opposed?
Abstain.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay, on to planning business. Now, we're gonna have, kind of a disjointed public comment period, so, if we need to remind people midway through, or people online, we'll go ahead and do a public comment opportunity for 8A, which is the, industrial park. And we'll have a public hearing, and then we'll have another public comment period for items 8C, D, and E. So we will start with 8A.
Perfect. We do have several folks who wanted to comment in person, so I'll read your name. But for anyone joining us online, you can press *9 or click reaction and raise your hand, and we'll recognize you folks after those people in the audience. So first, we'll go ahead and recognize Tom Feehan. If you can come up to the podium and state your name and address for the record.
And just as a note, we'll do our best, staff will take some notes on any questions so that we can try to address them after the fact.
And generally, we try to keep to 5 minutes or less. Council can extend, but just so you know, generally a 5-minute.
We'll attempt to be brief. Tom Feehan, 20410 Larkin Road. Good evening. I'd like to welcome you all back, and a special congratulations to any of you who had hard-fought, uncontested wins. Regarding Corcoran Farms Business Park, I'm just here to ask a few questions about traffic and PUDs. Regarding traffic, I'd like to ask, would any of you disagree that entering the Shuddy property through the existing commercial district is a much better access, while Larkin Road would be a last choice, especially where safety is considered? I'd also like to ask, would any of you disagree that most everything is for sale, likely including a vacant lot, needed to access this project through the district for the right price? So I'm convinced that the traffic study that Stantec did was prepared correctly, using all standardized data. The question remains, what is the best for Corcoran? Which access is safer, Larkin Road or through the commercial district? Regarding PUDs, this developer is proposing a build-to-suit project, meaning despite what is being presented via renderings, it's highly likely that every future customer will have specific needs that could impact the size and the appearance of every building. When this happens, it is also common that a new PUD request could be presented to the city. So another question, what if a new PUD is submitted a few years from now at a time when some of us may no longer be here? We would like to know what tools the city has to regulate a PUD today or in the near future regarding such things as color, materials, windows, buildings, entrance locations, and on and on and on. So again, I would please ask you to consider the fairness of this. I've asked this before, and consider the precedents this will set. It is very likely that a yes vote for this will invite more of the same at a future date. I think we need to all ask ourselves, are we demanding the best for Corcoran, or are we looking to justify an easier and more expedient path forward? Thank you, and look forward to your answers.
Thank you.
Next, we have Brandy. Gelly, sorry. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the council and mayor. My name is Brandy Gelly, and I have lived at 20129 Larkin Road for 15 and a half years. I live there with my husband, my 3 children, and our 2 dogs. I'm here to talk about the Corcoran Farms Industrial Park. I love the neighborhood that I live in on Larkin Road, and I love raising our family there. I grew up in the suburbs, and I only visited rural areas on weekends, holidays, and in the summer. I grew up around the noise of a busy suburb. I didn't need a nightlight in my room when growing up because the street lights illuminated it enough that I could see. I work in the suburb that I grew up in, but I would never want to raise my children there. When my husband told me he wanted to live where he could have a couple of acres, I told him good luck finding that in Hennepin County. I was happy living in my suburban home with the lights and the noise. Little did I know that he would find a gem hidden in the city of Corcoran, and that I would come to love living in the quiet and learning how to see in the dark. In fact, the quiet and darkness are qualities that I safeguard given the profession that I am in and the escape I need to get away from it when I leave work. I don't have any ill will toward the Shetty family. I hope that you get the best possible deal that you can when selling your land. I do have a problem with living across the street from an industrial complex. I no longer want to live with noise and bright lights. It's hard enough to work with loudness and brightness. Larkin Road is not suited to increase traffic that will come from an industrial complex, and Larkin Road will lose its beauty and rural landscape because of it. Part of the mission statement of the city of Corcoran is to create a preferred environment to live, work, play, and conduct business. Who would choose to live across the street from an industrial complex if they had options? My driveway is literally across the street from the Shetty farm. I will be looking at concrete buildings for as long as I live here, if you approve of this plot. Part of the vision statement of the city of Corcoran is preserving its natural character and agricultural roots. While I understand that progress is inevitable, it does not need to come at the cost of destroying someone's preferred environment and of natural beauty. I have a problem with the city council who ran on platforms of keeping Corcoran's, quote, small town feel and friendly neighborhoods, end quote. And if that sounds familiar, it's because it was taken directly from Councilmember Jeremy Nichols' Facebook page on October 20th, 2020. You came to my house and told me that you were tired of Corcoran not listening. And you ran on a platform of holding them accountable. And I'm asking for you guys to be accountable for that today as well. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you ran because you didn't want a mega church built across from your development. Councilmember Nichols also said that he experienced firsthand that the concerns of Corcoran residents were not being valued by the current city council at the time. Councilmember Nichols also said that he believed a city councilor should be tasked with listening first. Councilmember Nichols also said that if he was elected, he would prioritize the city changing its focus so that existing residents and businesses are treated as important stakeholders. Well, I can tell you that the families that live on Larkin Road don't feel like important stakeholders right now. We do not feel listened to. Mayor Tom McKee wrote on his Facebook page on November 2nd, 2020 that he will put residents first. Mayor Tom McKee also stated that he would make sure that everyone was not only heard, but actually listened to. The families that live on Larkin Road do not feel listened to. We want to preserve the rural look and feel of the city, same as you said on that post on November 2nd, 2020. You also promised to address issues with city planning and city code so that we could maintain that rural feel. You also said it's a waste of money to do a facelift of City Hall, and it's wasteful to pay money for a city planner that is a contract employee when we have a city planner already. And it's not fair that she gets to make decisions when she doesn't have the best interests of Corcoran residents at heart. If you had the best interests at heart, you would listen to those who are impacted the most by these decisions, which are the residents that live on Larkin Road. I realize that the comprehensive plan was put in place probably by a council that isn't seated here today. You can amend it though. You can amend the Shetty Farm to be residential rather than industrial. And I know that the power company put in a transfer station on the corner, northeast side of 116 and Larkin Road, and that it's, from my understanding, it's supposed to be a residential plat right there. Who would want to live by a transfer station? You can amend that to be an industrial area, and you can keep Larkin Road, where we live, a residential area instead. Being a council member comes with great responsibility and power. Please do the right thing. Please make responsible decisions with your power here today. Please listen to the families that live on Larkin Road, that want to live in a rural community, who want to live with beauty. I hope that you live up to your word and vote to deny this planned unit development. And if you vote in favor of this planned unit development, then shame on you for going against what you said you would do if elected. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Gail Waldorf.
Hi, my name is Gail Waldorf, and I live on 20117 Larkin Road. And I'm here to talk about how disappointed I am in regards to the proposal of rezoning the land across my street, as well as the proposed development plan by JMMK. First, a little bit about me, so you know who I am as an individual, because to you, I'm just a house number. I'm a young widow. As I unexpectedly lost my husband 5 years ago, I am not looking for sympathy, but I'm looking for you to understand my situation, okay? I want you to know where I'm coming from. I have 2 girls, and my younger daughter is graduating from Rockford High School this year and going to attend college. All of my equity is in this home, in my home, a stone's throw away of what they are wanting, not what we want. And remember your platforms that Brandy just talked about. What do you want? You say one thing, do it. Show it here tonight by voting no. My late husband and I have always followed the guidelines that the city enforces for the property owners. I never leave junk around, sitting around in my yard. I maintain my home as a homeowner should. I recently listed my house for sale because it's time for me to downsize. I no longer need a large home. In recent home showings, potential buyers love the beauty and the functionality of my home, but they wrap up their visit by commenting, with the extensive development that's happening in Corcoran, what's going to happen across the street? I had a house fire 12 years ago. My late husband and I chose to stay in Corcoran because we loved it, and we chose to rebuild on our property. So my home is only 11 years old. If the land across the street is zoned to industrial, the traffic on Larkin Road would increase as projected. It would decrease my property by 50%. 50. I have multiple realtors that have told me that. 50%. Now, just 2 minutes ago, I said my equity is in this home. My equity, 50%. I have received this information from multiple interviews, realtors that I've interviewed. Who is going to pay for the loss of my property if this goes in? JMK, are you guys going to? How about the city? We don't have funds like that, do we? I definitely cannot afford such a loss, yet you might impose that tonight. Now, keep in mind, I'm a resident who pays my property taxes on time and in full. Currently, I pay almost $8,000 a year, yet it may be okay to rezone the land across the street to be industrialized, which would negatively impact me. It's not a small decision that you guys have to make. It's huge, I get that. But the fact is that it feels like I and the rest of the residents on Larkin Road, we're getting slapped in the face because of having a dream to live in Corcoran, in a beautiful and relaxing place in Hennepin County, in the city of Corcoran. This is a residential area. So many of my neighbors and I have brought this to your attention before, that it would be unsafe to welcome an industrial park here. Rezoning the property from light industrial to industrial is just insane. You are welcoming accidents upon accidents into the area, as there are a number of avid fitness enthusiasts who jog, walk, bike, ride horses along with their families on Larkin Road. This is not the right place for an industrial complex. Like I've mentioned before, there are much better places for an industrial area. And there are many reasons why. Just north of City Hall here, of County Road 16, where a farmer has his land for sale, to buy that and welcome industrial business there. Can you just picture how nice it would be to have an off-ramp on 116 going off to the right, having a stoplight right there on the high-traffic road of 116 to an industrial park versus Larkin Road, a residential road? Since the last city council meeting, when the lack of safety was discussed about the Three Rivers Park District Trail going right through the industrial property, fences were talked about.
Just to let you know, we're just about at 5 minutes.
Okay.
We're not going to cut you off right at the second, but
Okay.
if you can.
I'm almost done.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Fences were talked about. I'm not quite sure why you would have a trail through an industrial park. Again, inviting accidents. You can guesstimate how much traffic this would bring. It would bring a ton, and it's the wrong place for all that traffic. There's a better use for this land. I am a proud member of the Rockford High School Agricultural Education Advisory Board, as well as Heidi Highland. She's on the board with me. She's the CEO of Heidi's Grow House in Corcoran and is passionate about educating people about horticulture and agriculture. Wouldn't it be awesome if JMMK would work with Heidi's Grow House to educate people, be an extension of the University of Minnesota? And the reason why I suggest that is because the farmer that rented the land for many years, says it's the best land he's ever rented before. It is so, such good farmland. Heidi was actually featured on Carol 11 News as well. So, I mean, there's integrity there. To wrap up, I would like the following. Delay this for 6 months, for many reasons. City Councilor Bodema is not here. He's ill, so it won't be an even vote. Assess what's best for the taxpayers, the landowners next to the property, as well as what's best to the city of Corcoran. This is really not the right place to do it. Either way, you, the city, will earn the tax dollars, and I will be losing out on my equity of my home. The residents here tonight, as well as myself, want to see the correspondence or the proof that the landowner on 75th Avenue or Street is not selling his property. Like before me, they said every piece of land is for sale. I want proof that he said no. I want proof that, in a written document from the county, that Hennepin County is not wanting to utilize County Road 50 to access this industrial park if it's so rezoned. Why not? What do they have to lose? Why use Larkin Road when you've got County Road 50? I want to see a written document of why that is.
I'll just interrupt you for just 1 second. I'll make a motion to extend comment for another minute.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay? Just like Counselor Nichols, you want to have proof that, what do we have written for trees that are removed? Why does Hennepin County not want to use County Road 50? Three Rivers Park District, do they really understand what they're allowing by having a trail through an industrial park, if it's so rezoned? Do they really understand the impact? I don't believe that it would be okay to have a trail right through an industrial park, just because there's a gas line right there. It does not make sense. One of the last things is that, think about your own property. Close your eyes and picture what your front yard looks like. Hopefully you can see stars at night, like Brandy talked about, and that there's peace and you can hear the crickets. That's what I have now. That's what we all have right now. But we won't if you guys vote yes. And you know what? I'm a stone's throw away from that 20-foot cement wall, if that's what you guys choose to approve. Please say no. Don't rezone. And don't allow him to build these massive warehouses here. It's not the right spot. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, real quick, what is your address one more time? I think I missed a number.
20117 Larkin Road.
There you go. Thank you very much.
Next, we have Linda Benson. And then anyone joining us virtually, if you want to press star 9 or click raise your hand under the reactions tab, we'd have you speak next.
My name is Linda Benson, and my husband and I live at 20205 Larkin Road. We are on Larkin Road and Blue Bonnet. We are right smack in front of it. I don't have a speech or anything, but this is just such a bad idea. There's nothing good about it. We've been here for 47 years. We lived here 47 years. Never in our mind would we have thought that this would happen, that there'd be a possibility of this. We had our kids grow up here. They were safe. Our grandkids come out to play. Now we have to worry about that if this goes through. It's just such a bad idea. And I just don't know what else to tell you. We just, and like Gail said, our property is the value of our property is gonna go down half. That's not fair. That's not fair to us. That's not fair to any of the people that live here. So please reconsider and deny this. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and ask that Ryan Richter and Katie Martins, if you want to go ahead and unmute.
Are they together?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
No, she just put that we weren't sure if she was going to be on or if I was going to be on, but this is Ryan.
Hi, Ryan.
Gotcha.
Can you guys all hear me there?
We
Yep.
can we get your name and address for the record?
Yeah, it's Ryan Richter. My address is 7225 Buckskin Trail.
Thank you.
I am on the south side of this pending development. I have been looking forward / dreading this day since the last time I was there in person. I'd be there in person had I not had something come up at home. It's exhausting to think about what is going on. And while I agree with Gail on postponing it, my reasons are just going to echo everyone else's reasons, and that's that I fear for the safety of my 3 kids. I don't I will say, I guess, I missed beforehand if there had been any improvements to the PUD. I did miss the first 10 to 15 minutes of this meeting. But I fear for the safety of my kids. I fear for that for many reasons, not just the increased traffic, but the possibility of having to, down the line, increase the lanes on the road, or just, beef up the road in general. I fear for the sound, as some others have said. I fear for the view. Again, we moved here from Denver. I know that you guys have probably all heard this a couple times now, but we moved from Denver not quite a year and a half ago to get away from that, because I can't afford to live in the mountains, which this is about as close as it gets to being somewhere that is away like that. So I tell everyone the end game is to live in the mountains and not have to worry about anything. Listen to creeks or rivers and the trees and the wind and all of those things. And this is as close to what I've gotten to the end game, which I don't know will ever happen if it's in the mountains. So this is my dream currently. This does take off my load from work. This does do all those things that I wanted it to and that we searched for. I lived here for over 6 months by myself so that we could find a place to live that suited what we were looking for, because we did not want to settle. We moved out here for those reasons. We moved out here because I can see the stars at night, because I do have great neighbors, because I do have a view of nothing but grass right now. Now I know that's going to be developed, but these other things are going to change. Not being able to hear these things at night, being the quiet, not having to fear for the safety of my children, and some of the things I just mentioned. I'm exhausted, and I'm lucky to have a place like this to live in when I'm exhausted. And for those reasons, I really hope that this either gets rezoned or postponed, like Gail said, to see how this plays out. Without sounding like a broken record, if I could keep it the same, I could, but I understand how selling land and making the profit off of that and, reaping the benefits of working all your life. I understand that. So nothing against you guys at all, but I just hope you guys rethink all of this or revisit it at a later time. Thanks again for listening, guys.
Thank you.
Yep.
And anyone else wanting to join us in the audience, can go to the podium and state your name and address, and anyone else joining us virtually can press star 9. Mayor and council at this time, no one else is raising their, oh, Ryan, did you want to?
Yeah, just one more thing. If I have a quick second, sorry guys.
No problem.
I had the thought of, if this does, and we are going to continue making improvements, if there is a possibility of, if this goes through, if there is the possibility to creating more opacity, or not, that's more of a buffer between our houses and the development on the south side of Larkin, so onto our properties, being whether that be trees or what have you. I don't know if that's a possibility, but it's an idea I wanted to throw out there if this does move forward, because I would like to see the least amount of this development, if it does go forward, as possible. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Anyone else?
Mayor and council, no one else is raising their hand.
Okay, give me 1 second to finish my notes. I think let's go into the staff report and a summary of maybe some of the updates and answering the questions.
I was going to
Yeah.
ask if you wanted
Let's do that
to
first,
go ahead
yeah.
and answer some of the questions first. Andrea, do you want to start, or would you like me to?
You can go ahead.
Okay, so there was some questions about the existing access. As mentioned by those folks in the audience, we don't, it's currently privately owned, so we don't, the city doesn't have access to that, but that's certainly, so generally, we don't look at roads if there's not access. In terms of 70, or in terms of the EAW for the County Road 50 access, the environmental assessment worksheet did, the county did respond to that and did say that they would not allow access on County Road 50. And then the Three Rivers Park District was involved in the Parks and Trails Plan review of this, so they are aware of the trail and did have comments about the trail.
Can I ask you a quick question about access through the current industrial park, 75th?
Sure.
If the applicant was to buy the vacant lot, could they petition the city to, at the developer's cost, connect that street through?
Yes.
We believe so.
We would have to do a traffic study and take a look at that route access, I think, as well, like we did for this, because that road is currently a dead end. But yes, that could be extended. It would cross a DNR, it's a public waterway. So
Right.
there are some implications with DNR permitting, but it's possible, yes.
Would the city still require an access onto Larkin, though?
Very
On that?
likely, yeah.
And just, Mr. Mayor, real quick, folks, we listened to every word you said. We paid all the attention we could. Please refrain from making comments. I want everybody to hear these comments, and I want you to respectfully listen to us. We are citizens, just as you are. We chose to be up here to try and make Corcoran better, whatever word you guys want to use. But I want to listen intensely, just as intensely as I listened to the 7 people that talked. And I don't need distractions. Thank you. The other thing there too, I think with the DNR and such, to access that, we'd be talking a bridge across that creek and that waterway, or that ditch, whatever we call it. There would be some, folks, that's
Likely-
another,
Likely be some sizable box culvert.
yeah.
And
So-
currently, it's not a collector, the roads in the industrial area, or in the current area are not collector roads, so they're designed to be a little bit different.
Well, I think, yeah, just to jump in there, I think we just, when we have a property and we look at someone coming in, we look at the property and because there is no right-of-way connected to those cul-de-sacs, we don't factor that into the EAW, because past practice, we don't look to acquire someone else's property with a project. So when we looked at this property touches County Road 50 and it touches Larkin Road. So that's what the analysis is based on when it comes in. County Road 50, due to the location of the intersection of County Road 10 and 50, the access spacing, the county would not allow that to be a permanent intersection. They only allow emergency access. So if you look at the plat, we are requiring them to extend right-of-way up to the north and target a location for a future access. So that's taken into account. That's public safety driven, that's traffic, transit driven. We do that for every development. And then to Councilmember Schultz's question, even if we did look at or have a conversation about connecting into the road, we would have to redo all the studies, look at the impacts to downtown, even the 116 75th intersection, right? That's not been part of the study. But we would still look and very likely make a recommendation that they should connect to Larkin Road. So whenever we have a sizable piece of property, we look for all those street connections. So it would not alleviate a likely connection to either road. So we just can't, it's just not connected to 50 yet. If this property went all the way up to 50, we would have a connection to 50. That's why we're kind of projecting one out where we know it's going to be allowed and permitted in the future. So does that kind of address a couple questions there on how we approach this.
Yeah, and Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, it's kind of,
No,
that's not our normal practice in
No, but
answering
good-
questions, but I thought
good
the
question.
dialogue back and forth when the question comes up would be helpful for everyone.
yeah, absolutely.
And then,
Can I ask one more question? Because the question came up from the first person about PUDs and changes in the future. Is it possible that this development could have came in with, because there's a misconception talking about rezoning. It's already zoned light industrial. That happened back in 2018. It's not something we're talking about tonight. The question is whether we go from a PUD or a non-PUD. If this was a non-PUD and they didn't have variance requests, it really wouldn't even come to council.
it would come to council as a plat, but it wouldn't necessarily.
We wouldn't have any
We wouldn't
limits
have,
to
we would
deny or-
have less, we'd have less discretion, less flexibility.
So can you talk about what's making this a PUD versus what it wouldn't have been? If it didn't come before us in a PUD, what would it have,
What
how
could be
would this
done?
have gone through?
So when they first came in, they proposed some flexibility. They could have asked for a variance. There are two variances that they're requesting PUD flexibility rather than going through that PUD process. The first is for setbacks along parking setbacks, not building setbacks. The buildings all comply with the setbacks. Parking setbacks along Larkin and along Blue Bonnet. You can count that as 5 variances because there's 3 different buildings, 3 different lots, and 5 different street frontages. So you could call that 5 variances for setbacks. And then the second variance is to allow the loading docks on the west side of the property not to be located within 300 feet of residential property without being separated by an intervening building. That's the second variance. And you could say that's 2 variances for A and D. So those are the 2 items of flexibility they're asking for. Parking setbacks and the loading docks.
All right, thank you.
I think those were the questions I had written down. Kendra, did I miss anything?
I think that's, yes, with the PUD, just on the first comment, there was just a question about how do you control that. So the PUD does give you more flexibility to control what the building looks like, and you could make conditions related to that. I talked about that in the staff report. So there are things that you can require with a PUD that you couldn't with standard zoning. Architecture is one of those. So there are things that you could do with the PUD to regulate those materials, entrance locations, et cetera.
I had a question about future state of Larkin if this were to be approved. I know we tried to get 80 feet of right-of-way. Would this development allow that in the area affected? And will there be a shoulder or sidewalk added to Larkin that improves safety versus today?
I can try to start. So this would require a 40-foot half right away. And then the properties to the south, there is one exception parcel, but that was platted, I think, in the early to mid-'70s. And it was the Lazy Fork plat, or South Lazy Fork plat. Everyone that was platted also had a 40-foot half right away. There's one exception parcel there. So we basically, if this goes through, we would have 80 feet of right-of-way plus 10 feet of D&U easement, where we could do some sort of pedestrian improvement there. It's not something that, it would probably be, in my opinion, something we'd have to do as a city. But I guess it's PUD, so I don't know how that works. I'm not a planner, but there would be room for us to accommodate pedestrian uses and transit uses, in my opinion, on an 80-foot right-of-way.
So could we fit a sidewalk on that north side? There's room for that?
I
know
would,
there's-
yeah, on an
there's fencing
80-foot
lines.
right-of-way, you could. I mean, we have a rural road, so usually sidewalks are in urban areas. We could do a trail. 5 years ago, I think, when the city looked at paving or repaving from 116 all the way down to the border towards 55. Part of that project was to construct a trail because all of our collector roads have trails designated for them, so we could do some sort of pedestrian enhancement of a corridor if the council's interested in having a conversation. There's enough right of way to do something. The current condition is more of a, it's just not, it's not the final condition, right? So there is room there to do some sort of improvement if that's the directive of council.
The question I have, and just point of order, we've heard from the public, we've got hands going up, Mr. Mayor, I don't know what we want to do with that, but for me, a big thing for me to make my decision, my decision is still out right now. What are we getting as residents of Corcoran, as a city of Corcoran, from this PUD? What benefits are there to the city if we were to grant this PUD? What are we getting?
I think that's to be negotiated to some degree.
I think that's a better question for the applicant versus staff, to be honest with you. They have to prove that point.
Just starting the question early. Thank you.
May I ask a question for staff? Because one comment came up about rezoning and flipping parcels. The suggestion that this property be flipped back to medium density and the property to the east of the Red Hennepin substation be flipped to light industrial, the trade, or the property north of City Hall. Can you talk about what that entails? It's not just an action we can make overnight or in a meeting. It involves quite a bit of work, right?
When we talk about a rezoning, we also have to talk about land use, and the land use is in the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan is the city's master plan for how the city will develop. And so the land use plan designates this property industrial. We talked about this last time. It was a change with the 2040 comprehensive plan update in 2018. It changed from medium density to industrial through a public process. There were a number of meetings related to that change. We would need to do the same thing again for a comprehensive plan amendment to change this from industrial to something else, or to change the property on the other side of 116 or near City Hall. Any change to land use has a public process and then has to go through a Met Council review process to make sure it's consistent with their plans. As part of that, we have to look at sewer capacity, and moving parcels of land does affect sewer capacity. Industrial land has a different demand than residential. So there's a number of things we need to look at, but the city can go through a public process, and the council, city council can make a change, and that goes through the Met Council. If that gets approved in both the city council and the Met Council, then you can rezone the property to be consistent with the land use. But it's not a simple process. The analysis is, significant, because you're simply moving that industrial land next to these neighbors to next to some different neighbors.
Yeah.
So, that same conversation needs to happen.
You're not just recoloring pieces of parcels on a map.
Right.
Or we're talking, 6-8 month process?
Yeah, I think that's about as quick as you could get through that.
I think that addressed most of the questions that I heard from the audience were actually questions.
Yeah, the only other one I had was someone asking to delay the vote 6 months. Just to clarify on that, we can't do that. There's a deadline on this, which is December
29th. So there's a
So there's-
120-day deadline
Yep.
for any preliminary plats.
And basically, the way it works by state statute is if it's not decided on by that date, it's approved as presented. And so that's why we can't just push it off to that far off in the future. But other than that, I think that did address most of the questions I had.
Council's comfortable, staff does have a presentation if you'd like we could go into, or have the applicant speak, whichever.
Let's do the presentation first, if we can go over maybe some of the changes from previous time it came here and from planning.
Okay. This is not the right.
Ooh. Oops, sorry, I thought I had gotten to that one.
Would you like my presentation or the applicant's?
Sure, if you want to go first, and then we'll have you guys go after.
So this is a rezoning from light industrial, which is zoned today, to PUD, a PUD, and a preliminary plat. Next slide. So 3 applications that are all tied together. We all know the property. Next slide. Just for background again, an EAW was completed earlier this year, and that did include the traffic study, the DNR, the county, Three Rivers, all weighed in on that. And again, that is public information available at City Hall. If anybody who does want to see a copy of that letter, that's in that EAW. Next slide. This is in the staff report. I'm not going to go through everything in a lot of detail, but I do think it's important to highlight that after this item was tabled last month, the applicant did go back and revise their plans to try to address both Planning Commission and council comments. And so the project square footage was reduced by a little more than 11,000 square feet. I know this isn't readable. It is in the packet, though, which is online. Building A, which is the southwest building, was reduced in width by 20 feet. That allowed the retaining wall near Building A to shift east 20 feet and add some significant landscaping in that area. I think it's a triple row of landscaping now. Additionally, since the Planning Commission, the height of buildings A and B, those are the 2 buildings along Larkin, were reduced from 40 feet to 30 feet in height. This district allows 45-foot high buildings by right. The wing wall on buildings A and D, those are the 2 on the west side, was increased to 90 feet long. Those are 30 and 36-foot high wing walls to screen the loading docks. The drive aisles between buildings A and D and B and C were removed. That was something Councilmember Nichols specifically asked for at the last council meeting. There's a 10-foot high composite fence that was added on the west property line to screen loading docks since Planning Commission. The applicant's been working with both the gas line easement holder and the transmission line easement holder, and since the Planning Commission, the the overhead power line easement holder has been working with them to limit the height of planted materials in that easement. And so they've added some landscape islands in the parking lot to allow some larger trees to be located outside of that power line easement and add some additional screening.
Can I ask how tall those would be? I know we talked about pretty tall trees earlier on that south side, but I didn't see a height in the packet on the new island.
Trees in the islands. I will look for that. I'm not sure off the top of my head, so I can just take a.
Can you illustrate those too at some point? Because it wasn't clear to
Yes,
me.
yep, I think I just wanted to highlight this and then I can show that. The trees in the islands look like those are just deciduous trees that are 2.5 inches, but I'll ask the landscape architect to confirm that when the applicant steps up. The trail was relocated as recommended by the Parks and Trails Commission and the Three Rivers Park District, so the plans now show that, and I do have a very fancy graphic showing that. It's not. There was some PUD flexibility requested for the parking setback to internal lot lines for buildings C and E, and they've revised the plans to eliminate that. That is no longer being asked for flexibility. More landscaping was added specifically on the west property line. Berms were added along Larkin. More details about the gazebo. I talked a little bit about that landscaping along Larkin. And then some shrubs and grasses were added in the gas line easement. My understanding is the local reps have approved that, but we're waiting for corporate final approval. So if you go to the next slide, I don't have a pointer, but you can see along Larkin those tan areas. If you can point to those bump outs, Jess. Those are the islands I was talking about right there. Those tan, yep. Those are islands that have been added along the fronts of those 2 buildings along Larkin to try to add a little more landscaping. You can also see that staggered row in that same zone that is a staggered fence. So it's a 4-foot high fence with some evergreen shrubs and some decorative plantings. That is something that the applicant can speak about. That was negotiated with GRE with the overhead power line. They're limited in the height of those buildings. You can, this isn't the best exhibit, there's another exhibit in the packet that's a little bit better, but you can see the wing walls on the west side of buildings A and D to screen the loading areas. There is a retaining wall that you can see on the plans as well. So the building is 10 feet below the residential property to the west, and there's additional landscaping. I think I have another slide, Jess, that shows an overhead. So this shows a little bit better for that south.
Sorry.
Yeah, I like that one. The southeast area, the retaining wall, wing walls, landscaping, and the addition of the landscaping in the gas line easement. You can also see a little bit better the trees up along Larkin in those islands. It did allow, again, some more separation from the buildings from the adjacent properties to the west, but it is not meeting that 300-foot setback, and so that's why the wing wall and landscaping is proposed to mitigate that.
And that wing wall's, what, 30 feet on building A, or whatever the southwest building is?
Yeah, 30 feet high and 36 feet high on the building D.
Okay.
I'm just going to double check that I didn't say that backwards, but,
I think that's right.
yeah, so one is 30 and one's 36, and both 90 feet long. Next slide. Again, this is just the landscape and zoning today. The comp plan and the zoning are both light industrial today, where the red star is. Next slide. Next slide, we talked about this. Next slide, we kind of talked about. So this rendering was in the packet. It gives you a little bit better idea of what it might look like along Larkin Road with the fence and that lower shrubbery screening the parking lot on that lower left. This slide, though, I was intending to talk a little bit about building architecture with this. It is a mix of gray and off-white tilt-up panels, and there is a little bit of articulation, meaning setback in the front of that building. The blue awnings do add some interest, and there's a good amount of glass along the ground floor along Larkin. And there are some clear-story windows or upper-level windows along Bluebonnet. I think one of the things that can help break up the mass of large buildings, particularly the 40-foot tall ones, but to some degree even the 30, can be some changes in color, movement in the building, those setbacks that we talked about, windows. Those are all things that can add interest. I think they're attractive industrial buildings. I think the council, as I said in the staff report, though, could think about whether in a PUD adjacent to a residential neighborhood, if there might be some other things that we could do. Different colors, although I like this, it's a neutral color scheme, but you could think about other colors, more changes in colors, more windows, things like that. Sometimes you'll see, every 40 feet you have to break up the building with a different color. It's sort of a random number, but it's a number you see, so there's different numbers you could use to break that up. But I wanted to show the one in the upper right to give you a sense of how long that building is along Larkin. I don't know that the applicant is here, or the applicant's architect is here, but the applicant could certainly speak to that as well. It meets the code requirements for standard development in an industrial park, but it is something where the council could ask for more as part of one of those PUD benefits that Councilmember Varenkamp was speaking about. Next slide. We talked about this last time, but I'll just touch on it again briefly. Kevin talked about it. The Bluebonnet will extend north through this project. There'll be a temporary cul-de-sac, and it will extend ultimately north. But Hennepin County has said that they will not allow an access where that emergency drive is shown where this property touches 50. And so we need to plan for a future through street further to the west. And so the applicant is providing that future street connection. As part of the feasibility study that was done as part of the EAW, the applicant is required to make off-site improvements as well, turn lanes on Larkin and 116, as well as Larkin and Bluebonnet, and then they are responsible for extending the sewer and water to the site. Next slide.
So the cul-de-sac, the temporary cul-de-sac that's listed to be a future through street would go to County Road 50, but not in the location that's currently available.
Through another
Correct.
property.
Correct.
And that's just because that's where the county wants.
Yeah, the exact location is yet to be determined, but.
they know
if
they
we
don't want
step
it
to
farther.
here, yeah, it just, where it comes out now does not meet their spacing guidelines.
Gotcha.
And so they want it to be further west. Something that else has changed since Planning Commission in the last council meeting, there was some request for flexibility on the landscape requirements. They have revised the plans to meet the code requirements. They actually provide slightly more landscaping than is required by the code. They do need to show on the plan some additional screening at those parking lots to screen the headlights, but the number of trees and shrubs meets code requirements, exceeds code requirements. The PUD flexibility requested to allow the loading docks, we did talk about that. There are the wing walls as well as some additional landscaping and fencing on the west side of the property. Along Bluebonnet, the landscaping along Bluebonnet does provide screening as well as some, you can see large evergreen trees planted on the edge of the building to provide screening. It's not a wing wall, but where a wing wall would be, there's a number of evergreen trees to provide the screening of that loading area. Next slide. This is my very high-tech graphic, but the yellow line is the realigned trail, which the plans have been revised to show that trail alignment, which is what was recommended by the Parks and Trails Commission and Three Rivers Park District. The green east-west line is a private trail that the developer will build and maintain that provides another connection through the site. And the blue is a sidewalk along in the right-of-way of Bluebonnet that will extend ultimately all the way up to 50. Park dedication will be required for this site, and credit will be given for the net area of the trail easement, the yellow trail easement, and anything else will be cash in lieu. And what I've put into the draft resolution is our code allows developers to be paid for paving those trails or reimbursed for paving them. But I did suggest that that would be one of the benefits of the PUD, that they would do it and not get reimbursed. I'm suggesting that as a condition for you to consider.
Is that in the draft?
It's in the draft.
Okay.
Yep.
Jeremy first, then Dean.
Sure. Given that the park district is involved in doing the trail, is that actually a benefit in this specific case, or are they planning to construct it as part of their own project?
We require the applicant to construct the trail to the Three Rivers standards, which is our city standard's an 8-foot trail, the Three Rivers standard's a 10-foot trail, wide trail, I should say, and they would be required to do that. Any developer would be required to. Lennar and Pulte are doing the same.
Okay, thank you.
Dean?
And this trail ends at the yellow line. It doesn't even hook to our parks, and it won't until?
Yeah, interesting, and Councilmember Nichols was party to that discussion. That was a big part of the Parks Commission discussion about whether that should end there or go somewhere else, and ultimately the commission did recommend that it stop there and wait until that property redevelops, or we can acquire an easement through that property for that trail.
Not to add another monkey wrench into anything, but could it go over to? No, it would go nowhere. I was saying, could it go over to the emergency entrance, but it wouldn't hook to anything across the street, and there wouldn't be a crosswalk.
That was part of the
On 50.
conversation, is should it go over there, and
Just,
I don't remember.
Should have paid more attention and logged on another couple hours into my volunteer.
They did very much discuss that. That was a question, is should that shift over and come out at the emergency access? And at the end of the day, they felt that it was
Okay.
better to stay here, and I don't remember the exact reasoning at this.
It's all right. I
think there was concern that it wouldn't be appropriate to use an emergency access as a trail.
again, it's not going anywhere either, so it wouldn't make a whole lot of difference, ended here or ended at County Road 50, and then we've got that whole safety issue if this were to go through, so. Just thinking out loud. Thank you, guys. Thanks very much.
I think I might have one or two more. Again, it's just, this is just the preliminary plat is 5 lots and 2 outlots. Outlot A is an association amenity. There's a gazebo there for people to walk to and have lunch. And Outlot B is a city, is deeded to the city for a potential well site. That is one of the benefits of the PUD is the dedication of the land rather than us having to acquire it. Next slide. This is that same exhibit you've seen, so I'll skip through this to the next slide. This is a rendering that was in the packet provided by the applicant from the property immediately to the west. So you see the trees that would be planted on the applicant's property. Next slide. This shows the trees, and you can see, it's a little bit hard to see, but you can see the wing walls extending from the building. They're slightly lower than the 2 buildings, the brown fence, and the additional landscaping. So this is the view from those properties to the west. Next slide. So again, the flexibility is for 2 items, and in exchange, these are some of the things you may consider as PUD benefits. The applicant can speak to that as well. So there's a number of options. If the council finds that the PUD standards have not been met, they should deny the request as recommended by the Planning Commission. If you find that the standards have been met, you should move to approve. We've drafted resolutions as a starting point for discussion. You could certainly, option 3, modify those. And if you feel that there's more information required, you could table the item as noted. We do have to act by December 29th, but you do have some time if there's additional information that would be helpful. So the next slide is simply those same options again, Jess, if you go to the next slide. Option A is the Planning Commission recommendation. Option B is another alternative. And went through that pretty quickly, but I know there's a lot you want to talk about. Happy to answer any questions that the council might have.
Thank you. Anything off the bat, or do you want to hear from the developer or the applicant next?
I have a long list.
Go for it.
So first one on my list was Larkin Shoulders. Sounds like that there is space for that, so that one has been resolved. Given the safety concerns, I would like to see there be a safe pedestrian route along Larkin. Whether that's a city project or part of the PUD, I wouldn't feel this could proceed without there being a safe way to walk along the road. Second item on my list was related to lighting. I know lighting has not been a topic that's been explored in detail yet. I'd like to also understand how tall those poles need to be. I'd prefer to see them as short as possible and ideally turn off at whatever reasonable hour, preferably before midnight, to minimize light pollution in the area. My biggest concern in the change from the last version to this version is the removal of the tall trees along Larkin. One of the key requirements and expectations of the PUD is that you ensure adequate transitions between adjacent zones. And I don't think we can get that with 2.5-inch caliper trees along that frontage. So I'd like to know what can be done to rectify that change that was made due to the power company's restriction on height. And similarly, I have concerns on the gas main easement area where there's some plantings identified that haven't been bought off yet by the corporate level of the gas company. I'd really want to see what can go there and how tall it can be before I'd be comfortable even holding a vote. So I would propose that we table this until we get greater clarity on the landscaping requirements. I would also want to see more architectural upgrades to the front of A and B, given the tree issue, where we can't go to the 16-foot ones that were discussed last time. I would also like to consider a suggestion that was made in an email from a resident, that we consider murals on the sides that face Bluebonnet and the trail to increase architectural detail in those areas, to make it really more of a landmark along the trail, so it really adds to the character of the city. I wanted to understand also the gas easement plantings. I know those aren't fully confirmed yet, but I'd like to know how tall those would be and what they would be. I'd also like to see where there isn't shrubbery planted. I'd be good to see like 3 to 4 foot tall native grasses or something that's more natural to the area there. I do think road access from the industrial park would be preferred. I like that there has been a shift from the previous version to this version where the building on the western edge has been shortened to add another row of landscaping. I think that was a positive move. Last question I had was how tall are the berms on Larkin, if those have changed since the like 2-foot high ones that we talked about before? And how would those be impacted by adding a sidewalk? And lastly, with the fence in that area, I'm glad to see that there is a fence. I think that helps. I don't think it's adequate the way that it's designed currently. Can that be taller? Can that be 6 feet, 7 feet, especially given the shorter trees?
Want to try to tackle? At least you might have to repeat a few.
I wrote them all down, so I can go back if I have to.
Well, I mean, I think the pedestrian route on Larkin, we had some preliminary design about that a few years ago. So I don't know where that was at. We could revisit that. I don't know. It probably requires some additional right-of-way acquisition, though, in some areas to make the entire, so we'd have to think about where that connection extends to. But certainly something we could look at. This developer could certainly, again, with this project in front of this, we have a 40-foot half right-of-way, so we could do something. What the comp plan says is Larkin has an on-road trail. What an on-road trail is a painted shoulder. That's what our comprehensive plan shows for Larkin Road. So if we're looking for something separated, I feel like that's probably a larger road project with the ditches. I'm going to kind of look to Kevin about that, but.
Well, there would be space, it would just be which side of the road do you want it? The residents that spoke tonight all live on the south side of the road primarily. So would you want the trail? I think it would probably be a trail because sidewalks are more common with urbanized areas, but so likely it could be a trail. Where would you want it to go? Think about those crossings. So I think with an 80-foot right-of-way, I think there's room to do that. It would just, we'd have to dial in what the goals of that are. So to that point, we just have to have more conversation about the goals. Just putting a sidewalk on the north side, well, I don't know if that helps, the pedestrian, the residents on the south side immediately, keep giving them some separation from the roadway. So it might be a trail, and then where do you want that to go? All the way to 116? Is it just across their properties? I don't know. So more conversation would be needed. But the short story is there would be enough right-of-way to do something.
Other than a shoulder.
Yeah, I think we could, 85, I mean, like, the roads in Ravinia, for instance, or Chevere, they're 50-foot right-of-ways, and we have a sidewalk. It's urban, so you can squeeze it a little bit more, but this would be 30 more feet. That's significant even with a ditch. It does get built, if you're looking at it and leaving the lane, it builds it, if you put it on the south side, it builds it into people's yards, and that was one of the issues that we
That's why I
5
suggested
years
north
ago,
side,
is like,
yeah.
it feels like an impact, but that's the design of the roadway, right? So like, if we added a trail on the south side, just to be transparent, it would likely be separate. If we wanted a separate trail for pedestrians, it would likely come into those yards where we have that right of way.
Yeah, that's why the north side might be preferred. I would imagine the residents would rather not have a trail in their yard. They'd rather on the other side of what's going to happen.
We'd rather not have it. It would be my front door.
My biggest concern on trails is what's going to guarantee that the pedestrians are going to use them. We have trails all over our city that people are still walking on the shoulders or riding bike on the shoulders. So I'd love to see something, but I think that it's a long discussion on top of this stuff too. So. And again, folks, please, if you could, we are trying everything we can to listen to everybody. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
I think the second question was about lighting, and we do not yet have lighting details. That is a condition of the code. Lighting cannot exceed 1-foot candle at the property line. That's what our code requires. And the light fixtures themselves cannot exceed the height of the building, and they do need to have 90-degree cutoffs, which eliminates some of that night bleed so it directs the lighting down to the ground. The applicant may have an idea for what those will be. At this point, though, we don't have a plan, but they would have to comply with those standards in the city code.
But lighting would only be lighting on the buildings that we're talking about, right? We have no control over Wright Hennepin's lighting of the streets.
Correct, so, thank you. So street lighting is determined by Wright Hennepin, and we will have some street lights along both Blue Bonnet, and probably add some on Larkin, at least at that Larkin, Blue Bonnet intersection. But within the parking lot, we may have some lights, as well as the building lights. So I would expect they'll be back, in the back where the loading docks are, there will be some lights, but they'll have to be directed down and not up.
Yeah, I mean, you could talk about it all you want, but I don't think we have, if it moved forward, we wouldn't have significant control over lights to make it meaningful to anyone that's living in the area. I mean, I could speak to what they're saying. When I moved into my neighborhood, it was dark. When Ravinia was developed, there was a lot of discussion about streetlights and downward lighting and whatnot. I sleep at night now, and it's like I have a street light out in front of my house, and I don't. You know, it's a block away. It'll change the feeling of the neighborhood, and that's gonna happen whether this goes in or if it's
Housing.
if it's housing.
Or by right industrial, or any of the,
Yeah.
any option.
Any development's gonna create light, so, sorry, that's just a fact about it, but just so you know, there's nothing we can really do in that manner. So,
And then, I think the next were the elimination of the large trees on Larkin, concerns about that, which I think the applicant can tell you more about the conversation with GRE than I can. Some desire to talk about some undefined upgraded architecture, which may include murals. And again, I think the applicant could talk about that. You'd like to see some native grasses in the gas line easement if it's not planted with shrubs, and they can speak to that, I think. And then, I think a comment that you liked that they shrunk the building and added landscaping, but would like to table this until those 7 questions, comments are addressed. Did I miss any?
How tall are the berms? And has that changed?
Don't think they've changed since the last council meeting. I think the berms are only about 2.5 feet tall. So the applicant can speak a little more to that, but that's the same as the packet you saw last month.
Okay.
Anything else for Kendra, or do we want to hear from the applicant?
I think we should hear from them.
Yeah. If the applicant would like to speak? I don't know if you have, do you have anything to show?
No.
Perfect.
I think we've got everything here. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, and staff, everybody in attendance tonight. My name is Jeff Minia. I'm with JMFK LLC, the developer and the proposed project and the applicant. I think what I want to do is just try to remember as much as I could of what you talked about and try to address the most the ones that I think were most important. And what I heard first and foremost was what were the advantages of the PUD, and so what's the development giving? And I think there were some of them addressed in the staff report. So those I won't reiterate, but the things that we have brought that are inherent to our project that costs a lot of money and a lot of planning to go into making sure that it's done right is the first is that we took this site on because it sits next to a MUSA line, the sewer, sanitary sewer line. So, but we can't just stop there. We have to take that line and we have to move it across the site so that it distributes to the buildings, and also it was requested that we bring it all the way to the south of the site so that it can then be an advantage.
Future access to anything.
For anything else, right. So I think as if this development goes through, then that's the advantage after that piece is done, that somebody can take it from there and develop and increase properties and develop however they want to do it. I won't speak to how other properties develop, but there is value there. As part of the trunk extension, we are required to extend sub-sanitary and water lines to the east and west out to the edge of our property, so that those adjacent properties can also convert to municipal water and sewer when they want to. So those should increase the value when they do hook up. We will be building a new road extension of Blue Bonnet at our sole cost, based on the city specifications, which will become a public road. In addition, we are required to build the road up to the northwest, to the edge of the site, which will be an additional expense, but we'll put the road in the perfect position then to have the city be able to take it to the next site, through the next site. Our total spend is about $2.5 million to do all the infrastructure so that the sites can be hooked up to sewer and water and be serviced by a road. Those are all of our costs to do that. We are willing to incur all costs for providing additional screening, and we've tried to address as many things as we can, and we're continuing to do that. And we have increased our costs for that. I don't have a dollar figure for that, but we're trying to make it as neighbor-friendly as possible. We did lower the heights from 40 to 30, we mentioned that earlier, on those two buildings along Larkin Avenue, again, trying to reduce the scale and make them as attractive as possible. However, I will say that the fronts of these buildings are very much like any office front. The industrial part of the building is in the back, and the front is a very, as attractive as possible. It's where people want it to be as attractive, and so it's not a residential area, but it's very benign. People pull up in their cars, they go in their offices, and there's windows, and it's supposed to look, it's modern, and it's quiet. There's not much to really get upset about, in my opinion. So nonetheless, the front of the buildings are trying to be as attractive as they can be. The approval of this development also involves no city assistance and will accelerate the opportunity to provide new commerce to the area, while increasing the tax base, which on a conservative basis should yield the city over $1,400,000 per year when fully built out. We did, as mentioned earlier here, reduce the westerly width of Building A by 20 feet, moved the landscaping further in, and added more landscaping to that westerly side of that building. We also added fencing along the front yard, which is here for discussion, and we also have a private park area that we put in along the upper northwest corner where the road would go. So our goal was to be as developer friendly as possible. We have continued to evolve and extend our openness to do that, and I think that's really where we're trying to go, and that's what we just did in this last go around. So I think really we can answer more specific questions if need be with our civil engineer here on some of the technical aspects of it, but for the most part, I think we've tried to continue to make this as good as we can. And so I hope that you can see that it isn't necessarily a black and white answer as to how many benefits should it be to make it work, but it does have to work for you guys. And it's an light industrial project in keeping with what the city wanted, and or should say is the zoning. The PUD flexibility was required, of course, because of some of these inherent issues that curtailed our ability to build the site. Without those, we just would have had too many restrictions to get enough real estate on the property. It's a business decision that we decided on to then go forward with a public, to make it fit in the public application process. So early on, we came in early February, and we put a plan down, and we explained that to the city, and we said, hey, there's only so much depth here from the easement to Larkin. There's only so much depth, and that is continuing to be the case. And we needed to pick a method or a way to go. And once we had heard from the city that it was okay and to go forward that way, A PUD was what we were planned to do, and we said it was because of those items. We got the head nod, we got the green light in that regard, so we went and invested all of our time and energies to develop all the plans to do that. And so here we are today with our good faith, based upon a set of conditions that we were guided by, and we have tried to check all the boxes, which I think we've done, and we're hopeful that this would go forward because it has the sensibility of the fact that we put all these pieces in here the way we were guided to be asked to be done. So without, I don't want to keep continuing on with this, but if you have, like we can talk about some of the other specifics here. Last thing I will say, on Building B, the length of Building B is the length that it is because Blue Bonnet needed to be set up to be in alignment with the Blue Bonnet road that's to the south. So we were asked to put the road there, which we said, sure, we'll design from that road point. And so when you look from that road point to the east property line, the site is that wide. And you really don't get any benefits by, it would be less real estate if we were to cut the buildings and make them smaller, but literally you just have a curtailment. You can't, there's no other frontage to put another road cut in there. So that site is long because of the alignment of where Blue Bonnet needs to go. So I just wanted to explain that. We've had a lot of constraints here with the gas easement, the road alignment, and many other factors. So we've tried to do the best we can, and this is really the best result that we can come up with. And I think everybody's seen that and understanding that, but sometimes we forget. But that's the best I can tell you.
Mr. Mayor, just real quick, Jeff, on the power line, I'd driven this, stopped, I don't know how many times, I forgot all about the power line. There's no conversation of burying that too high of a transmission line to be underground.
You're talking about the overhead power lines in the front yard. No, not that I'm aware of, Jeff.
I'm
Our sewage, we haven't.
knowing what I know, it will be above ground for a long time.
Yeah.
And then a couple of the residents across the street have talked with me, and it's not something we can make part of any deal or plan or anything, but they are open to conversations with you on enhancing their streetscape, if I may say, adding shrubs, trees, those kind of things on their property to do that, but that's a whole nother discussion. That's not part of our request here, but just letting you know they would be interested in entertaining something like that, so, if this were to go through.
All right, we understand.
I did have a question on, I saw you did reduce the building height on two buildings, I think it's A and, I mix up which,
And B,
A and B? Is it, which is north of?
D is in the upper left.
That, and I think when you and I spoke a while ago, that we talked about maybe that one as well. Was there a reason why that one wasn't reduced?
Yes, well, the depth of
Yeah, the
building
north.
D is much deeper, and
Mhm.
the front two buildings are shallow. They're, by industrial buildings standards, they're only 150 feet deep. Therefore, with a shallower bay depth, a shorter building is appropriate and can be designed, or I should say, can go with that depth. That building D has got 190 to 220 feet of depth. It has a little bit more than, what happens with that is you have a deeper bay so that you can put your racking in higher. So you want to have more distribution capabilities when you have a depth that you have there. So buildings D and C and building E on the north are all deeper buildings in that 200-foot range, and they just lend themselves better for somebody to have the flexibility to put up a wall, a height where they can rack it higher. And if we don't have that, it just curtails it may limit the value of the building and limit the number of people that would be interested in it. So we just felt that it was a challenge to allow that one, for that reason, to go up to a lower ceiling height.
Gotcha. The other item, Dean, go ahead.
I noticed you've eliminated the lanes of traffic over the gas line easement and such.
Right.
Those are gone,
Correct.
and that was part of our discussion last.
Right.
Okay.
Felt that those weren't critical, so, especially with the fact that there was the trail through there, we didn't want that interfering, so we thought, well, if we're gonna take one of them away, we might as well take them both away.
It makes more sense. I don't agree with where the trail is and such. I'd rather see it at the far edge and stuff, but that makes it a little bit more palatable. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Of course. I'm trying to remember from last meeting, Dean, you had some comments about building E, was it, the long?
Yeah, the question I had was, could that be broken up and not be so big? I think our conversation last meeting too was a timeline on these buildings and all of this construction. It's going to be a while as things come. That building is a monster in my mind, but I understand why. So, again, the timeline, all of those things, shrinking the height of those front two buildings and the level of where they're going to be makes it easier to understand. But again, I truly do understand and absolutely hear, and I think we all do, the concerns of the neighbors across the street and such. Some of the things that I've talked about, if this were medium density, we'd be talking 6 to 11 units per acre, so.
Most dense development in town by.
It would be the most dense, 4-story possible apartment. I mean, all kinds of things could go in here if we were to revert back to. But again, that process is at least 8 months of doing something and stepping back. I'd really wish I could look back and see how much public input came from the neighbors to the south and stuff when this was all done back in 2017. I think you had said, Kendra, that there was 20-some events, meetings talking about this rezoning and our comp plan in that general area and such. So, I mean, there was tremendous participation. Do you remember? I have a hard time remembering yesterday after sitting here spending 8 hours on this packet, but.
That's accurate. There were a number of public meetings, some of them were more focused on specific topics, but yes, there were 20 public meetings, and some of the people in this room tonight were at those meetings.
Okay.
And perhaps not all of them, but we did do our best through the comp plan process to notify people through the website and newsletters and other mailings that this was under discussion. So again, every 10 years, we update the comprehensive plan and we take a look at street planning and parks planning and land use planning, so.
And this was medium density for how many? Couple of decades?
It was for sure in the 2030 plan, which was adopted in 2011, it was medium density. I don't
Okay.
remember before that if it was.
Okay.
Looks like the landowner's saying even before that, in the 2020 plan, it was medium density.
About 16 years.
So a couple of decades in my rounding up. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Phil, very much.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I don't remember anything else. I'd love to see the buildings broke up and such, but again, I think doing something in this general area like our current industrial and commercial to the east, while that serves its purpose, something a little bit more organized would be nice to see. I still think, I asked the question last meeting too on where would how big the buildings would be and where would they be set. And I think the answer back was these would all conform with light industrial and such. It's just all of the traffic and those kind of things are what we're talking about. Again, another thing that I look at for all of us trying to keep our taxes where they are is how much money is getting invested to do sewer, water, those kind of things. And it's nice that we don't have to come up with $2.5 million to put sewer and water here. And that is a benefit to us as a city and landowners to the west and south, that when they develop, it's already stubbed. There's no extra expenditures there, but I know that's not something anybody's looking at because nobody wants to move from those areas, and I respect that. So there's a lot going into this, folks. All 5 of us up here, Councilmember Bodema too, we think about this very long and very hard to make something good for this, and I appreciate what the developer's done, the current landowners have done and thoughtfully thought this out, and I appreciate everybody's input tonight. Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, I can answer one of Councilmember
Please.
Nichols' question, which was how big are the trees in those islands that have been added? Those are 10-foot tall conifer trees. But the engineer might be able to talk a little bit more about some of the gas line and overhead power line. I know he stood up to do that,
So
yes.
these are 10-foot conifers, these
Right.
ones on the island here?
Right.
Can you show that again, Jeremy? Which ones you're talking about? Okay.
The ones in these brown carve-outs? So there's, it's hard to count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I think.
So good evening, my name is Jeff Shopik, I'm with Laux, I'm the civil engineer on the project. So yes, we took out basically 3 stalls, so 3 times 9 is 27 by 20. Those are larger landscape islands that we put through that whole front. GRE wanted and so those trees will go, 40 feet tall eventually? And then behind those, we have evergreen pines, I think they're mugos, that might grow 6 to 8 feet, and then smaller ones closer to Larkin on those. They have this 1-to-1 slope that they don't want bigger trees in. But really what they want is if, under the power line, if they gotta drive down it to change the wire rubber, they don't run into a big tree. Now, we also looked over the city. I can tell you, a lot of people don't follow that. There are huge evergreen trees right under those power lines, but nobody caught them. I'd say there's even probably some out in City Hall. But we want to follow the rules. And so, no matter where these are, that's where it's going to be. So we looked at how we could stagger them. The fence you brought up, we're given the fence ordinance by Kendra. And the fence ordinance says that in the front, it only gonna be 4 feet high with 50% opacity. So that's what we installed in kind of 40-foot chunks front and back. Willing to do more, but now we'd have to ask for a PUD amendment to put a bigger fence in, and we'd have another checkbox. So I don't know, we didn't want to add another checkbox without knowing we should. And I don't know.
Sorry to interrupt you quickly. Would it necessarily have to? We could amend the resolution to.
Yeah, I think what he's saying is it would be more PUD flexibility.
Yeah.
But I think I heard him say they'd be willing to do either a more solid fence or a taller fence.
Don't want too much a taller fence, because now you're gonna see a 6-foot fence from Larkin, which without landscaping in front of it might look odd too, but, I mean, to do a more solid fence or, something else we'd be looking at, but we didn't want to ask for another flexibility. I think the one key that Kendra said is that these buildings are at the building setback from Larkin and from Blue Bonnet. We could actually push the one building A farther to the west if we went to straight zoning, and all of them could be 45 feet tall with no variances or requests.
Well,
So-
can I ask you on that?
Yes.
So the buildings meet setbacks, but parking doesn't meet setbacks. So what is, if we denied the PUD and you had to follow straight zoning, what does this site look like? Can you draw us a picture in our minds?
We would probably lose the front row of parking along Larkin.
The front
And-
row or the whole front parking area?
Probably the whole front row. Now, we are somewhat overparked, but,
So
and
there'd
then
be
the building
parking
would
on the
be
building
45
side.
feet tall, and we'd extend, building A could go over 20 feet closer to the west property line, back basically where it was.
So you're only losing the parking row where the tree islands are?
Correct. And we could look at maybe adding a few more in there too. I mean, we just kind of looked at, see what we want to do. And maybe not quite so evergreen tree, we could do a deciduous, it doesn't need the 3 stalls, it could use 2 stalls, which is 18 feet, and put some in there. So we're still, coming back to the city and looking at stuff. In the gas easement, essentially what we planted in there was grasses, shrubs, so there's not they'll grow 4 to 6 feet tall, but they're all really something, a backhoe. So if the gas main has to get in and they're coming in with a backhoe, they're just gonna run over everything and tell you gotta replace it. And so they're all just scoopable out. Now, that doesn't mean they can't be 4 or 6 foot tall, but those tall grasses are a lot of those in there, and then some smaller shrubs, just to break up the visibility. But there are no trees in there because the gas company wouldn't allow that. And they're between retaining walls and down a corridor, so I mean, it's gonna, on the lower end, you're gonna be down below the, on the east end, about 6 feet below those walls, so you'll be in a 50-foot corridor, and with those grasses growing up, everything will be up on top until you get closer to Bluebonnet.
Or do we know at this point from the gas company that the shrubs that you're intending to plant and the fences as they're drawn are okay, or is that still not quite certain?
Well, it meets their criteria in their guidelines, that as long as we don't put large shrubs. We do have a fence along the west property line that 1 foot inside the gas main. That's a 10-foot high fence. They didn't tell us no, but we gotta go through a whole process. It's gonna take weeks to get that done. But we said it could even be removable with stakes, so if they had to pull it out, it would only, if they had to get at the gas main, instead of having 25 feet on that side, they'd have 24. That's the extent of it, so. But we have to work through that process, and that's gonna take weeks, but that's why we also had the other fence on top of the walls going down the corridor. So we have these fencing here or that one, so we're either gonna block the corridor this way or block the corridor that way. So either way, the loading docks will be screened from the west.
Sorry, 24-inch gas line? Is that what it is?
I think 16 or 20.
How deep is it?
It
Doesn't have anything to do with this, just trying to get educated.
And anywhere their standard buried depths are 3 to 5 feet.
Well, thanks.
And that's where it is, all over the whole metro area, and
I thought it would be deeper. Thank you
No.
for
and
entertaining
there's
that.
roads crossing them, and it's,
Thank you.
yes.
I think you addressed part of my question. The reduced parking setbacks, staff report says along Bluebonnet and Larkin.
Correct.
And we talked about what's on Larkin. So if you change on Bluebonnet, what does that do?
It would be the same thing,
You lose just those rows?
those rows, that would be it.
Okay, and then what about the standard from loading docks being within 300 feet of residential be screened by a building?
Well, we're looking at the wing walls, because it is part of the building. Those are gonna be attached to the building, part of the building structure. It's not truly so it'll be a building wall, be the same facade as the building, same structure, so it is a building up to within 20 feet of the gas main.
Does that actually constitute a building in city code? A wall extending?
Well,
I don't think it does meet the language in the code. I think that for the PUD though, or with the variance, it would be the council's discussion about whether it meets the intent.
It's, yeah, basically a way of mitigating
I mean,
what it's not meeting.
I mean, this might sound silly, but we could put another wall 30 feet from there, have a jut out of the building, 30 feet wide building, call it a building.
Right.
I mean, there'd be no purpose behind it, but it could, I guess, in your hypothetical deal, be one little bay going out.
Well, I'm
90
trying
feet.
to understand